What is going on, TCG enjoyers? Stellar Crown has been out for a couple weeks now. We've had the Japanese Champions League, and we have 2 regionals happening this weekend in Brazil and in Germany. I've had the chance to play with a lot of the new decks, the new cards, so I thought I'd give you guys my opinion on where I think each deck is in the meta in the tier list here, and let you guys know what you should be playing. So before I start, just to break down what I would say each tier signifies. So S tier would be like a deck is broken, it's better than every other deck. Tier 0, if you're not playing this deck, you're trolling. A tier for me are the decks that I would say are the favorites to win a tournament. If I had to pick what deck is going to win the majors this weekend, I'm going to pick these. B tier is the decks I think are pretty solid. They could contend for a top cut spot, but I would be kind of surprised if they won. C tier I'd say is kind of those decks that I don't think can make top cut. You could maybe make day 2. And then D tier is just D for don't play. So I've ordered the decks here in the tiers based on their play rate on Play Limitless and online tournaments. And I just added some niche decks at the end as well. I'll spend more time obviously on the good decks though. So to start off, we have Charizard Pidgeot. Charizard, regardless of how good it is, always sees play. And I think Charizard is definitely A tier in this format. I think it was A tier in the last format, and I think it only really gained Briar, but I do think Briar just adds another layer to the deck. You can kind of force your opponent onto 2 prizes through using Dusknoir. You can win now when you're at 3 prizes. So you just have a little bit more comeback potential. I think the deck is still strong. So I would personally play it with a Dusknoir. I think a lot of strong players like playing Charizard. So I predict there will definitely be a couple of Charizards in the top 8 across Brazil and Dortmund this weekend. So next up is Raging Bolt, which has been the most popular deck in Japan. It just won their Champions League. So it should maybe A tier, but honestly, I just think Raging Bolt's B tier. I think its matchup spread isn't the best. When you go down the list of all the other popular decks, Raging Bolt's really only favored into Dragapult and Regidrago, I'd probably say. I think it wins a lot of games just because it's so aggressive and it is very simple to play. So I think it's a great deck for making day 2 at a regionals, especially if you're a newer player. You don't want to play something with as many lines. The deck is very strong. I just think it's too linear, and I think the best players are able to just take advantage of that fact. Next up, we have Dragapult Pidgeot, which this deck has been seeing a lot of play, a lot of hype because of that new Terra Crystal tool. Basically just buff the Neo Uppers. Now you can Arbor for that tool, and you also got Crispin. I honestly think this deck's a little overhyped. I think it's B tier. I don't think it's A tier. I think it still has the same problems it's always had. It's very slow, and your opponent can capitalize on that. When you go first, it's kind of shaky because you have to get that Arven turn 2 and get that Crystal normally. And I know I just put Raging Bolt in B tier, but that's not a bad matchup to have just because Raging Bolt is such a popular deck. I'd say the best thing about Dragapult is it is good into Charizard, which is nice. But I still don't think it has the best matchup spread. And I'm not a believer overall of the deck. I think it's too slow for me. So I'm gonna put it in B tier. But it's definitely the type of deck where I'm I would not be surprised at all if I saw it make a top 8 if a strong player plays it. I just think there's better decks to play. Then we have Regidrago. So Regidrago has gone way down in play in this format. I'm not really sure why. It's definitely still an A tier deck. Charizard is about to go up in popularity. That's a good matchup still. Raging Bolt's a bit shaky, but I don't think the matchup's that bad. I think we've seen a lot of players now, they're pivoting to that triple Iono build of Regidrago, which I would play 3 Iono if you're playing the deck myself. I just think having that option against the aggressive decks, you need to stick them for 1 turn, I think is really solid. So I think Regidrago's still A tier. If all these evolution decks start getting more popular, like Dragapult Pidgeot, like Charizard does, I'm going to talk about Gardevoir next, which might go up and play a little bit. It all bodes pretty well for Regidrago, and I have noticed a lot of decks are cutting mana fee because it seems like Regidrago is going down in play. So I think Regidrago is really well positioned in this specific format. And I think with less people playing Regidrago as well, people aren't going to target the deck as much. So I think if you've been playing Regidrago, I think it's completely safe to keep playing it, and I'd say it's probably a pretty good play. Next up, we have Gardevoir. I think Gardevoir's solid B tier. I think it still has the same problems it has in this format. But one thing I would say that's great for Gardevoir is the reason it's not very strong in the format before Stellar Crown is Regidrago is the most popular deck, and that's just a really, really bad matchup. But it looks like Regidrago is going to go down from that 17 to 20% down to maybe a 10%, even less range maybe. So your worst matchup is definitely going down in play. So I think that's really good for Gardevoir. Raging Bolt being popular, very good. That's a good matchup. In the Charizard matchup, it's not the best, but you can still play TM Devo and make the matchup pretty close, in my opinion. I think now that they have Dusknoir in every deck and they have Briar, it's a little trickier to beat Charizard because they can kind of put you on a clock much faster. But I still think Gardevoir is like a pretty solid deck. I mean, Henry just beat me in the finals of Baltimore with it. So I guess the interesting question is, do you play a Henry style build or do you go back to that slower build that focuses more on the TM Evo? I think you probably go to the slower build just because Regidrago is going down in play. So Henry kind of played that fast build kind of in response to Regidrago trying to get those turn 2 Gardevoirs. But I think in this format, you probably have time to go back to the Evo build. I guess one other bad thing for Gardevoir is if the Terapagos deck gets popular for the Dusknoirs, that's a really bad matchup too, but that's yet to be seen if that's going to be popular or not. Miraidon is up next. I think Miraidon's like C tier. It just doesn't have a good matchup spread. You're bad into Charizard, you're bad into Raging Bolt. Gardevoir is probably fine. Pidgeot, Dragapult's fine. Drago's like fine. I actually think Drago's 50-50. I don't even think you're favored into that. I don't know. I just don't think Miraidon's that good. Lugia is not that popular anymore either. So to me, I think if you're gonna play an aggressive deck, just play Raging Bolt or play like, I'll get to it later, like the Turbo Moon or something. So next up we have Palkia and Noctowl. I actually think this deck's really good. Noctowl as a card is just like insane. Like searching your deck for like 2 trainers, like it can be even like supporters. Like Noctowl to me has felt like insane as an engine. The Area 0 card is really good. It basically makes it so Palkia is gonna pretty much like one-shot almost all the like V-stars and basic EXs and basic Vs, which is pretty nice. The deck can take advantage of I'm blanking what it's called, Briar. And also like a lot of decks are cutting that mana fee. Like I was looking at Champions League decks and like none of the Charizards are playing mana fee. So if you can get that turn 2 Moonlight Shuriken off, you're in a really good position. So I think Palkia Noctowl is pretty good. I think it's better than Palkia Dusknoir, which I'm going to put... I think Palkia Dusknoir probably like near the bottom of B. It's just less consistent than Palkia Noctowl. But Dusknoir I think is a very strong card right now. Being able to just like snipe off against the evolution decks like the Charizards and the Gardevoirs, the Dragapults. I think it is really good. I just value the consistency that the Noctowl brings to the deck. So, alright, next up is Terapagos. I think this deck, everyone's very split if it's good or not. I personally think the deck is like insanely good. Like I even considered putting it S tier, but I think it's not proven enough for me to put it there. So I'm going to put it A tier. I legitimately think if you go first with Terapagos Pidgeot, you do not have a bad matchup. Like that's how much I believe in the deck. It's just crazy. And if you play it with Dusknoir too, I should clarify. Like it's just crazy. Like you can win like in 2 attacks pretty much like every game. It's like it struggles against the decks that like don't have stuff for you to ping if they get going. So like if Charizard can get a fully set up board, it becomes a little tricky. If Lugia can get a fully set up board, it's kind of tricky. But like against the aggro decks like Raging Bolt, as long as you don't give up 2 prizes first, you win. Or like if you like even if you give up 2 prizes, like you can use Briar and Dusknoir to kind of like come back from like out of nowhere. And the deck I think just hasn't found like the right build yet. I don't think anyone has like the perfect 60 for it yet. So I legitimately believe if there's a strong group of players in either Brazil or Germany, if they figure out the Terapagos deck, I actually think it's going to win the tournament. Or like be a couple, if like a group plays it, I can see a couple of their members making top cut. I really do think the deck is that good. So I might be proven wrong, but from my testing, the deck has felt like the best new deck from Stellar Crown. And I think just like the fact that like even your bad matchups on paper, like if you go first, you just have such a good chance against them. I think it makes the deck really solid. It takes advantage of Fan Rotom like fantastically well. That's another great card in the set. So I'm excited to see how it does this weekend because I've been beating the drum pretty hard that this deck is really good. So next up I have Lugia. Lugia is probably the bottom of A tier if I had to say. I don't think anyone's going to be playing like Temple or Enhanced still. Just from me looking at lists around the internet on online tournaments, is what people are posting. That really determines like where Lugia is in a format. Like if there's Enhanced and Sinnoh going around, like the deck's just not that good. But if there's not, so like Charizard's not playing it, Charizard's a pretty good matchup then. I think Drago's still a good matchup, especially if they cut the Sinnoh. I think Lugia is actually pretty good into the Terapagos deck. I think it's pretty good into Raging Bolt. It's the only thing you really don't want to sit across from is like the lightning decks, which I don't think are going to be that popular. So yeah, I think Lugia is just solid. Like same thing as always, consistency kind of holds it back sometimes. But I think it's still in a great spot if you're willing to like roll the dice a little bit, both figuratively and literally, with your Mesagoza flips, your Capturing Arm flips. I think Lugia is a fine deck. So if you've been playing Lugia, like you can keep playing Lugia. It's still really good. Next up, Turbo Roaring Moon. I'm gonna put this in B tier, which is where I would put it, like in the pre-Stellar Crown format. I think it's good. I think it's fast. I think it's probably the most consistent deck out of all the decks. One thing that's going to hurt the Turbo Roaring Moon a bit is its best matchup was Regidrago, or one of the best matchups was Regidrago, and that's going down in play a little bit. I don't think the deck is like super good into Charizard, which is poised to be like one of like the top 2 most popular decks. And it's not the best into the Terapagos deck because you do have to use Frenzied Gouging to knock out Terapagos, and then they're just going to pick you off with Dusknors. So yeah, I think it's just B tier. It's like a solid aggro deck. I just don't think it's like the best. So next up, Snorlax stall. I almost always keep Snorlax stall in A tier. I think especially at regionals when it's such a large player base, like a lot of people don't know how to play against stall, so you kind of just get that edge automatically. And I think with Charizard being so well positioned and it's going to be one of the most popular decks, like having a great matchup against that is really good. I think it's pretty solid into Raging Bolt. It's like decent into Regidrago. It's not that good into like Lugia, which I don't think is that popular. Terapagos matchup's kind of close because they can use Dusknoir to kind of like deny your counter catcher, so you really do have to rely on boss in that matchup. But yeah, just it has a good matchup spread, I think, against the most popular decks, so I think it's always gonna be good. Iron Thorns next. Iron Thorns, it's pretty decent. I'm gonna just put it near the top of B tier or low A. I'll say top of B tier, just because I think no one likes this deck. So Iron Thorns again is another one of those decks where it's good against Charizard, which is nice. It's probably like 50-50 into Raging Bolt in my opinion. And like a lot of the decks actually rely on like these like turbo basic rulebox engines, like the Terapagos, the Palkia deck does, Regidrago does, Raging Bolt does, Turbo Moon does. So you're actually shutting off a lot of stuff. So yeah, I think it's pretty good. We've even seen some people playing Regidrago cut Cologne. So if you're playing against Regidrago without Cologne, I think the matchup's like pretty favored. It's just if you play Iron Thorns, like there's not much skill expression with it. You're kind of just like relying on what matchups you hit and how your opponent draws and how you draw. So if you're just there to like get points at the tournament, I actually think Iron Thorns is probably like the best deck for that. But for going on a deep run, I don't know if Iron Thorns is the best deck. The next up we have Pidgeot Control. I don't really play Pidgeot Control. I don't even know what a Pidgeot Control deck would look like right now. My friend Jeremy Gibson and Liam Halvern, like Jeremy made top cut at Baltimore with one. So I'm just going to say if you know how to play Pidgeot Control and you make a good list, it's an A tier deck. Otherwise, it's not. Ancient Box up next. I think going into Baltimore, it was like hyped a lot. The guy kind of bought into the hype as well, but I think we saw that the time rules isn't good for it, and its Charizard matchup's not the best. I think another thing in this format is a lot of decks are going to be like rocking Briar. So they like Ancient Box. One of the reasons it's so good is you kind of like cheat the prize race. So like now I guess like other decks against you, like they can also like cheat a prize against you. So I think it's probably like B tier. I think like low B tier maybe. It's still good into a lot of decks. Like you're still good into Raging Bolt. You're still good into Regidrago. You're good into Iron Thorns. You're good into any turbo deck. You're going to struggle, though, with the evolution decks. So you just can't hit the numbers, I don't think. So you're going to struggle into your Dragapults, your Charizards, and you're going to struggle into your Lugias. So I think B tier is good for that. Okay, next up we have Dragapult without Pidgeot. I don't know why I put this on the tier list. I'm just going to say C tier because I don't know. I know that Shintaro played a build with Dusknoir Dragapult, like without Pidgeot. And then like Fez is his draw, but like that just doesn't seem good enough to me. I just think Pidgeot's too good not to play. Then we have Lost Zone Box. I think that honestly, am I gonna put in D for do not play? No, you can make day 2 with Lost Zone Box if you but it's gonna be an uphill battle. I think also if all these decks start playing Dusknoir, makes it even worse for Lost Box since they can just pick off your guys if they're playing from ahead. I mean, like Regidrago still a deck with Ciaran. Yeah, I don't think it's Lost Boxes format. I think we've seen that for a while. And finally, just out of respect, I put my favorite deck, Chien-Pao, on the tier list. It's definitely a C tier deck. I'm not going to put it in Do Not Play. It's good against Charizard, and you can beat Raging Bolt if you don't start a 1-prizer. So you have a chance against the top 2 decks, but it still has the same problem where it gets farmed by Regidrago. I think a lot of its matchups are you have to go first, like for example against Lugia, against the Terapagos deck. Terapagos probably just farms you anyways because they play Dusknoir. They can just pick off all your Frigivaxes. You're batting a Ancient Box. Well, it isn't that popular, but I don't know. Chien-Pao, you just need a lot to go right, and I just think the format's just not right for it. So that's going to do it for my tier list. If I was going to a regional this weekend, I would probably play Terapagos or Lugia as my backup deck. But honestly, I think the format's at an interesting spot where there's not one deck that to me stands out as like the best deck. I think there's a lot of decks that are viable and that could win the tournament, which I think is pretty cool. I'd say the metagame is very diverse. It doesn't necessarily mean it's healthy, but I think it's probably a healthier format just because like there's so many decks for you to pick from. So I think there's probably a deck for everybody. So let me know if you're going to a regional this weekend, or even if you're going to a League Cup, what deck you've been playing, like what maybe deck you want to see me talk about more in the future. But best of luck in all your games, and I will speak to you soon.